Why did you get fired? A business I went to long ago was hiring and I got the job. Right after I signed all the paperwork, the department manager comes in and asks who I am. I tell him I was just hired as a temp. Manger says he never authorized any hiring and fired both me and my boss on the spot. I did not work for this company at all and they fired me. I had a similar experience. I was interviewing for a sales position, and I made it all the way up the ladder through 3 different managers. To the advertising director, had a great interview. He told me I would be the future of this industry, shook my hand, led me to the HR manager's office, clapped me on the back and said to her, "We're hiring him. Start the paperwork and I'll see you Monday." She was pregnant, tired, and annoyed. She looked at me with disgust and said, "We eliminated that position yesterday. We're not hiring anyone." I asked if the director or managers knew that. She said they should. What followed was an embarrassing 2 weeks of promises that they would make a spot for me and week. Apologies from the hiring managers. Oof. Hired and fired within seconds. They did you a favor. Working for a company that broken and dysfunctional would be a nightmare. It was McClatchy Newspapers in Boise. I think their motto turned into, "Fail up until you fail out." You dodged a bullet. I don't know many people who have worked in newspaper advertising and haven't come out of it with some amount of PTSD. I had literal flashbacks for years. You have to really love it to stay without burning out completely, or have to really not give any SHS whatsoever. Papers are also really one-edged financially, so they are prone to screwing people over hard too. I went to the emergency room instead of work. Came back with a note and they said, "We won't be needing that. Can you come with us?" I was 18 and it was my first full-time job. Please tell me you walked out of that office and went straight to the labor board. At-will employment in the USA is a joke. At-will employment doesn't mean they can fire you for literally any reason. Despite what employers tell you, it's still illegal to fire someone for seeking medical attention. My dad always taught me anyone can be fired for any reason, it just depends on how much they're willing to pay or how naive they think you are. My dad lost a great job due to corporate BS and they just drew out the litigation. So he had to settle for far less than he was entitled to because we couldn't afford the legal fees, and it would eat up a lot of the settlement. Hard lesson to learn as a kid, but it suited me well. I don't trust big corps or employers in general to have my best interests in mind now. His wife thought he was having an affair with the office manager. He asked me if I thought it was possible that he was having an affair with the office manager. I said, "It's possible, but I don't think you are. I could see why your wife might think so too." I was 21 and naive as heck. Never should have said anything. He was 100% having an affair with the office manager, lol. She knew too much. I was denied a raise by HR after consistently working 6,070 hours weeks, and my VP, who had supported and requested the raise for me, told me to stop putting in the extra time, work my 40, and spend that extra time applying to new jobs. Within a month, a meeting was called to mutually part ways because my work wasn't getting done. I was gratified to learn that they had to hire the people to do my job after I left. Edit. Sucks to see how much this resonates with people who have been in a similar situation. I left this job back in 2015. Thankfully, the VP is no longer there either, and good for him. That felt good knowing they had to pay to people for what you did all by yourself. Glad you got out of there though. Maybe this is just the millennial in me, but if I was working 70 hours a week, denied a raise, and had my position filed by two people, I wouldn't have felt good or gratified. I'd have been pissed. Wasted my time, wasted my life, wasted my potential. Refused to pay me even half of what they're now paying that company, and everyone involved in the process of denying that raise should themselves be fired for being F-wits. The only thing this story conjures in my mind is that scene from Futurama, where they show all the Fox executives after making a joke about canceling and bring the show back. Companies do that because it balances out. For every person who does two jobs, asks for a raise, doesn't get it, and quits, there are multiple people who just put up with it and keep going above and beyond. I made the decision a while back that would never be me. And so far it's worked out for me. This is correct. The math says it's the right decision, but that's often only because the math can't track actual quality or quantity of work. It's one thing when a worker's product cannot vary in quality and quantity is easily traceable, like someone who loads parts into a machine. Still, it's horrible that we have a society set up in such a way. After all of this trash is a product of capitalism, and we are capitalist by our own choice. We should just not allow what we don't want. Obviously, nothing is this simple or direct, but in general, for doing my job too quickly and sitting down the rest of the time, gas station cashier third shift. Me. Why should I stand when I'm the only person in the store? Manager. It's more professional to stand than sit. Me. Then why do you sit in your office? I never understood that. Not once have I walked into an establishment, seen an employee sitting, and gone, wow, he's unprofessional. I literally don't give a F as long as you do your job. Especially gas stations, if anything, they're the kind of jobs I would expect to see someone sitting. Same for cashiers at grocery stores and other department stores. Nobody thinks. You look at this cashier sitting down while she helps me. This store sucks. If they do, they're pieces of SH, and no normal company should cater to their sadistic whims. In fact, I prefer places where the workers are treated humanely, like being allowed to sit and be comfortable for the duration of their shifts. I was an entitled little SH with a summer job between my junior and senior years in college. I thought I was getting a data entry job. It was indeed data entry to an extent, but most of the work was actually taking items off the shelves in a warehouse and taking pictures of them. These pictures would be scanned and then entered into a system with a description. I thought this was below somebody with my obvious as an engineering student who had failed to secure a summer internship in his field. I told my boss that the work was really a two-person job. The other person could do the warehouse stuff, and she agreed and said she'd look into finding another intern to help. I took that to mean I could slack off posting on Warcraft 3 forums all day until they hired the other guy. One day I came home to a voicemail telling me to not bother coming back. I 100% deserved it. I dislike my younger self sometimes. Don't be so hard on yourself. See it as immaturity, a learning moment, and be grateful you were good enough to see through the experience and learn. Kids do all kinds of crap anyway. Agreed. My first job, I was a dipsh who be-ed and moaned about standing at a register for 5.5 hours, minus my break. I wish I could go back and slap the SH out of myself, lol. When I got my first job, I was so excited to finally be able to complain about my job, since that's what I always saw people doing on TV. So at Thanksgiving I complained about having to work a 6.5-hour shift. No one said anything, but I cringe so hard at that nowadays, lol. You made me laugh with this one. Reminds me of when I was in college. I remember thinking people sounded really smart saying phrases like, "I'm not gonna lie," and then laying down a truth be. In an interview I used this line and the interviewer asked, "Why would lying even be a consideration here?" I did not get that job. What a dumb Came down with bronchitis on a Sunday. The doctor provided a doctor's note and told me to return the following Monday. They terminated me Friday. Edit. I didn't want to share too much of my business, but people are saying I'm spreading misinformation when that's not true. I did not qualify for FMLA. I was sick on a Sunday. Informed them Sunday. Called Monday with a doctor's note with orders stating I was to return no earlier than the following Monday. My manager told me, "Okay, feel better." Friday came around, and I received an email stating I was terminated effective immediately due to absences. This was my first absence. I asked if I qualified for FMLA. No. I asked if I could resign instead because I loved what I did and who I worked with. No. You can be fired as an at-will employee at any time for anything. I didn't mention the illegal outcomes, as I assumed that was implied with common sense. Anyways, thanks for the input. Y'all. In Germany, if you come to work when sick, it is a reason to get fired, as you could harm your colleagues and it prolongs the healing duration. But not if you don't come to work when sick. I'll never understand the USA where bringing contagious diseases to work which could potentially kill. The whole company is encouraged. Employee, I have tuberculosis. Employer, come or you're fired. Employee, okay, next day. All dead. Company bankrupt. Nobody can continue because knowledge is gone. Boss is happy, but in the USA changing jobs like underwear is more common. So people don't care that much, I guess. Serious questioning. Not a reproach. In Germany, people work 45 years for a single company. People in the US used to stay at companies for a long time, but companies took advantage of that and generally treat people worse and take away reasons. Pensions. Worse retirement plans. Health care act to stay. It doesn't hurt that the older workers are in such bad financial shape they can't retire, so the upper positions are taken up by 60 workers. So the younger generations have figured out leaving is the only way to move up and make more. And does this have more to do with the takeover of corporate culture by 80s MBS and the loosening of regulations around business at the same time in Germany? The law helps enforce long-term employment. Yes, and you can blame that effort Regan.edit. I don't care if I spelled his name wrong. I won't correct it, BC. He was a useless sack of for most of the population, and I'm not gonna dignify his crusty $1. For reporting elder. That's retaliation, illegal at least in the US. Unfortunately, it's also extremely difficult to prove. And expensive to fight. That's the issues with most civil matters. Sure, you can just sue someone if you are in the right, but you better have thousands of dollars to win. I refused to come in 15-20 minutes early unpaid for my shift. I was always 510 min early, but they decided they wanted me there earlier. I carried on as normal as I'm not coming in if I'm not being paid. Turned up for a 12 p.m. shift at 11:49. No one would look at me when I arrived, then was thrown in a meeting and fired for being late. Was out the door before it even hit 12. It was the only time I've ever been fired. You went out the door and straight to the Department of Labor, right? Nope. UK. Worked for them for 3 years, then left for another job. Other job didn't work out and old job reached out to me. They wanted me back and I needed a job, but it also meant that they could fire me for dislike for reason they want as I was in the probation period. They had me work the Christmas rush, then used that excuse to fire me right at the end. They could have just not given a reason and dismissed me at the end of 3 months as no longer required. But they wanted to be petty, likely because I had a minor disagreement with a manager. Minor disagreement was, I made a judgment call and ordered the newbies to get the stock out on the shop floor during a rush rather than being bothered about how straight the labels were. Manager went bananas over it. I thought selling the stock was more important. I got in so much over them darn labels. Not sure how it works in the UK, but in the US it doesn't matter if you are in a probationary period. If you get fired for not working unpaid hours, then the company gets in legal trouble. I got fired once for putting in my 2-week notice. The only other time I've gotten fired was working for a trade company. During the first week, I was a supervisor, and there was a second supervisor on site. I got a call that my wife had been rushed to the hospital, which was literally less than a mile away. I asked the other supervisor if I could go to attend to her, and he said sure, no problem. I've got things here. Go. I returned to the job site later to find the boss there, and he let me go on the spot for leaving the team without a supervisor. He knew what had happened, and still fired me. I won't lie. That one kind of pissed me off. I had this happen once too, though they gave me 2 weeks severance when they did it. Turns out they weren't angry that I was leaving. They just had prior bad experiences with short-timer syndrome and didn't want the hassle. So they paid me as if I'd done the 2 weeks and sent me home immediately. Worked out fine for me. I got a 2-week paid vacation since I wasn't starting the new job for 2 weeks anyway. Between jobs. That's a normal thing in some places. They call it garden leave. I talked my way into a job at a software company when they put a hiring notice in a local paper. I had no idea what the software did. I still don't. They hired me as a trainer and no one ever explained what the product was. I did a few weeks where I was trained on the software, but literally none of it ever made sense to me. It was like they were speaking gibberish. One day I showed up. A lady I had never seen before gave me a check and walked me out to the parking lot. No one even ever said you're fired or anything. It's one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. That reminds me of a time that I got escorted out early from a group interview. The company was a little suspicious altogether. The interviewer was even more sus because he was just wearing all black polo and jeans, and was absolutely decked out in gold jewelry. Looked like he stepped out of a mob movie or something. Sounds like you were interviewing for a pyramid scheme and asking questions they didn't like. I walked out of one of those before actually meeting anyone once. I knew what it was and didn't want to go to it. My parents, however, aren't the sharpest sometimes, and they really believed the thing that came in the mail saying a 17-year-old could get a sales job, making over $100,000 a year. The interview was literally in an abandoned former hotel, with printer paper signs directing you what room to go to. I walked in, and there were a bunch of kids waiting who all looked younger than me, like 13, all wearing their middle school choir best of a way to large white button-up and baggy khakis. I turned around and walked out. Spent an hour at a local music store and told my parents the interview went badly. Oh man. I did something similar. I was job hunting during an off semester and my mother insisted it was a legitimate job. I showed up. Knew for certain it was a scheme of some sort when I saw the ring of people sitting in a half-empty room. I told them it was a scam and walked out. Drove home and told my mom it was 100% a scam and I walked out. She was just happy I went. Because my job was eliminated. This was code for getting rid of you and hiring someone to replace you at half the salary. Their scheme was less than a stellar success because the person they hired was an idiot and could not do it. The customers got severely pissed. They gave me $15,000 severance if I promised not to sue them. I took their money and still sued them for age discrimination. And won. And darn, this is a whole movie right here. I asked the CNA I was working with to stay with a confused patient, while I went and put a new 4 in another patient. The CNA left the patient alone. She fell out of bed and got a big bloody skin tear on her arm. After I took care of that, I went and found the CNA and told her the patient was injured because of her insubordination. The CNA cussed at me and left the unit. I did not see her again that shift. She and another CNA decided on their own to trade assignments. I wrote the CNA up. The CNA went to MGMT and lied about me. She said I called her by a racial slur and yelled at her. I did neither. Gump fired me rather than deal with a false claim of prejudice. I collected unemployment. The CNA did something similar with another nurse a couple of weeks later and was fired. Minder asked if I could be rehired. HR said no. When my mother quit to start her own nursing agency a year later, she hired me. You can't pay me enough to go back to work in a nursing home. I have so many stories of problems between nurses and CNAs getting each other in trouble and the residents caught in the middle. Nurses in nursing homes are so unbelievably terrible to each other. I worked in food service at a small nursing home for 4 years, and the nurse drama was so big that everyone in the facility was always up to speed with it, even if they didn't give a flying F about it.